Right now, the numbers are falling faster than anyone expected. At Lake Mead, the waterline is dropping by the hour, not inches over weeks, but measurable declines within a single day. Sensors embedded along the canyon walls are lighting up in rapid succession, triggering alerts deep inside the control rooms of Hoover Dam. Engineers are staring at screens they've trusted for decades. What they're seeing doesn't make sense. This isn't seasonal decline. This isn't drought as usual. This is acceleration. Footage coming in right now shows vast stretches of pale, exposed rock. What was once submerged for generations, now sitting in the open air. The famous bathtub ring is no longer a ring. It's a towering scar across the canyon walls, growing by the hour. Boats are being pulled out. Marinas are shutting down midday. Operators are issuing emergency closures with no timeline for reopening. Inside the dam, the mood has shifted from concern to alarm. Water intake valves, massive steel structures designed to pull life-sustaining flow into the system, are beginning to suck in air. That's not supposed to happen. Not at this level. Not this fast. When air enters these systems, it creates violent turbulence, unpredictable destructive forces that can damage internal components within hours. And yet it's already happening. Downstream along the Colorado River, flow rates are starting to fluctuate. Subtle at first, but enough to trigger automated warnings in distribution networks stretching across multiple states. Pressure, inconsistencies, irregular surges, then sudden drops. Something is destabilizing the system. Local authorities are being flooded with calls. Residents are reporting unusual water pressure in their homes. Some losing flow entirely, others seeing bursts of murky, sediment-filled water. Emergency hotlines are lighting up. But inside the control center, one phrase is now being whispered, then repeated louder with every passing minute: approaching dead pool. And if that threshold is crossed, the dam stops working. Not gradually, not safely. It stops. Right now, the silence is over. Inside federal buildings across the Southwest, emergency briefings are no longer behind closed doors. Officials are stepping in front of cameras, some calm, others visibly shaken, as the reality begins to surface. What was once labeled a manageable decline is now being reclassified in real time. A crisis. At the center of it all is the Bureau of Reclamation, the agency responsible for managing the water systems that sustain millions. Just hours ago, they issued a statement acknowledging rapidly changing conditions at Hoover Dam and the surrounding reservoir. But behind that carefully chosen language, something far more serious is unfolding. Sources inside the agency are now confirming that emergency contingency plans once considered worst-case scenarios are being activated. It's not prepared. Activated. Engineers are reporting that water intake structures designed to operate under stable pressure are now encountering air intrusion at levels never recorded before. This creates a phenomenon known as cavitation, where collapsing air pockets generate shock waves powerful enough to pit steel, crack concrete, and tear through turbine systems. And it's happening right now. At a hastily assembled press conference in Las Vegas, officials attempt to reassure the public. They emphasize that water is still flowing, that systems are operational. There is no immediate danger. But the questions from reporters cut through the calm. How close are we to dead pool? What happens if the turbines fail? Is there a backup system for 25 million people? There are no direct answers, because the truth is there is no real backup. The entire system, from Nevada to Arizona and deep into California, depends on a delicate balance of pressure, elevation, and flow. And that balance is beginning to collapse. Behind the scenes, emergency coordination calls are linking multiple states. Governors are being briefed. Water districts are being told to prepare for unprecedented disruption. Internal documents now reference potential delivery cutoffs, something that was never supposed to happen under any circumstances. Meanwhile, energy officials are raising another alarm. Hydropower generation at the dam is becoming unstable. Turbines require consistent water pressure to function. As levels drop, that pressure weakens. When it falls below a critical point, power generation doesn't just reduce, it fails entirely. Which means this isn't just a water crisis. It's an energy crisis unfolding at the same time. And as officials continue to speak in measured tones, One reality is becoming impossible to ignore. They are no longer in control of the timeline. Whatever is happening beneath the surface is moving faster than their ability to respond. This didn't start today. What's happening right now at Lake Mead has been building for years, quietly, slowly, almost invisibly, till it wasn't. Records show the waterline has been falling for more than 2 decades. Year after year, the level dropped. At first, it was dismissed as part of a natural cycle. Droughts come, droughts go. But then the pattern didn't reverse. It accelerated. Satellite images began to tell a different story. From space, the reservoir started shrinking in ways that couldn't be ignored. Shorelines retreated hundreds of feet. Entire boat harbors were left stranded on dry ground. What used to be deep, cold water turned into exposed sediment baking under relentless sun. Still, the system held. The warnings were softened. Officials introduced conservation measures, voluntary cutbacks, and long-term projections that pushed the worst-case scenario decades into the future. There was always time, they said. It's time to adapt, time to fix it. But inside engineering reports documents never meant for public eyes, the language was far less reassuring. They warned of critical thresholds. They highlighted minimum operational elevations. They outlined a scenario where intake valves would begin pulling in air, triggering the exact instability now unfolding. And yet, those warnings stayed buried. In 2021, the first major alarm was triggered. Water levels dropped low enough to force the declaration of an official shortage, the first in history for the Colorado River system. Mandatory cuts followed. States were told to reduce usage. But even then, the reductions weren't enough to reverse the trend, because the system wasn't just under pressure from drought, it was overdrawn. For decades, more water had been promised than the river could reliably deliver. Cities expanded. Agriculture intensified. Demand kept rising even as supply kept shrinking. And then came the heat. Relentless, record-breaking temperatures began to accelerate evaporation at a scale few had predicted. Billions of gallons lost directly into the atmosphere. Not used, not stored, just gone. Each year the margin for error disappeared. Each year the buffer shrank. Until now, there is no buffer left. Inside Hoover Dam, engineers are no longer debating projections. They are confronting reality. The levels they once modeled as distant possibilities are now visible outside their windows. And worse, the decline is no longer steady. It's unstable. That's the part no one fully accounted for, not just how low the water would go, but how quickly it could collapse once it reached a tipping point, a point where small losses trigger larger ones, where pressure drops lead to inefficiencies, which lead to even faster losses. A chain reaction. Right now, that chain reaction may already be underway. And the most chilling part, every warning sign was there. Every data point, every projection, every quiet alarm buried in reports and briefings. They saw it coming, but they didn't stop it. Right now, the flaw is no longer theoretical. It's active. Deep inside Hoover Dam, beyond the visible concrete face and the roaring spillways, lies a system few people ever think about. Massive intake towers, submerged structures designed to pull water from Lake Mead and feed it into turbines and distribution tunnels. These towers were built for a world where water levels stayed high. They were never meant to operate like this. For decades, the design worked flawlessly. Water entered at depth, under immense pressure, flowing smoothly into turbines that powered entire regions. But as the reservoir dropped lower and lower, that design advantage turned into a vulnerability. Guess these intakes depend on depth. Without it, everything changes. At critically low levels, the distance between the water surface and the intake openings shrinks to a dangerous point. Instead of pulling in dense, stable water, the system begins to draw in air from above. That's where the real danger begins. Air doesn't flow like water, it collapses. Inside the intake tunnels, those air pockets implode under pressure, creating shock waves, tiny explosions that hammer the internal structure over and over again. This is cavitation, and it's one of the most destructive forces in hydraulic engineering. Right now, engineers are reporting signs of it. Vibrations, noise, irregular flow patterns. The system is starting to tear itself apart from the inside. And here's where the $6 billion flaw becomes impossible to ignore. Over the past decades, billions were invested into maintaining and upgrading the dam, reinforcing concrete, modernizing turbines, improving output efficiency. But the fundamental design of the intake system remained unchanged. It was never fully adapted for a future where water levels could fall this low. They upgraded the performance, not the survival threshold. Emergency fixes were attempted. New intake structures known as low-level outlets were discussed, partially implemented, but never scaled to handle the full demand of the region. They were backups, not replacements. Now, those backups are being pushed toward their limits. Inside control rooms, engineers are watching pressure readings fluctuate in ways they've only seen in simulations. The margin for safe operation is shrinking by the hour. If cavitation intensifies, turbines could suffer catastrophic damage, not gradual wear, but sudden, irreversible failure. And once that happens, restarting the system isn't simple. It may not be possible at all under current conditions, because the flaw isn't something you can patch from the outside. It's built into the way the system was designed decades ago, under assumptions that no longer exist. Right now, that assumption is collapsing, and with it, the reliability of one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure in the United States. Right now, the crisis is no longer contained to the dam. It's spreading fast. Across the Southwest, cities that depend on the Colorado River are beginning to feel the first real shockwaves. What started as fluctuating pressure and technical alerts is turning into something far more visible, far more frightening. In Las Vegas, residents are waking up to something they've never experienced before: dry taps. Entire neighborhoods report water pressure dropping to a trickle, then stopping completely. Social media is flooding with videos, faucets sputtering air, brown water surging through pipes, storage tanks being drained faster than they can be refilled. Stores are being cleared out within hours, bottled water gone, bulk containers gone. Anything that can hold water is being bought, filled, and hoarded. Lines are forming outside distribution centers as authorities attempt to manage the surge, but supply is already falling behind demand. And this is just the beginning. In Phoenix, officials are issuing emergency advisories, urging residents to conserve every drop. Lawns are going dry. Car washes are shutting down. Restaurants are limiting service, some closing entirely as uncertainty spreads through the system. Further west in Los Angeles, the response is more controlled but no less serious. Water agencies are activating contingency plans, rerouting supply, tapping into reserves. But those reserves were never designed to replace the scale of flow coming from Hoover Dam. They're buying time, not solving the problem. Meanwhile, agriculture is taking an immediate hit. Fields across Arizona and California are being abandoned mid-season. Farmers are receiving emergency notices: cut usage now or lose access entirely. Crops that require constant irrigation, vegetables, fruits, feed for livestock, are at risk of dying within days under the intense heat. Food supply chains are starting to tremble. And then there are the smaller communities. Towns that don't make national headlines are being hit first and hardest. Limited infrastructure, minimal reserves. When the flow weakens, they don't have backup systems to rely on. Water trucks are being dispatched, but the scale of need is overwhelming. Hospitals are preparing for worst-case scenarios, rationing water, delaying non-critical procedures, stockpiling whatever they can. Emergency services are being stretched thin, responding not just to medical calls, but to unrest, because fear is spreading. People are beginning to realize something they were never supposed to face. This isn't a temporary outage. This is the beginning of a system-wide failure. And as the water disappears, so does the sense of control. Right now, the system is breaking under its own weight. What began as a water crisis is now cascading into something far more dangerous: a multi-system failure spreading across the Southwest. The moment flow from Hoover Dam became unstable, everything connected to it started to strain, then fracture. Power grids are the first to feel it. Hydroelectric output from the dam is dropping sharply. Turbines that once generated consistent energy are now stalling, struggling against fluctuating pressure and incoming air. Control centers across Nevada and Arizona are reporting sudden dips in supply, just enough to trigger rolling blackouts. Lights flicker, then go out. Entire blocks in Las Vegas are plunged into darkness without warning. Traffic systems fail. signals go dead. Highways clog with confusion as drivers are left navigating intersections with no control. Emergency generators kick in, but not everywhere. Hospitals are holding for now. But backup systems aren't built for long-term operation. Fuel supplies are finite. Cooling systems already under pressure from rising temperatures are starting to falter. Intensive care units begin to prioritize power usage. Non-essential equipment is shut down. Every second counts. Water distribution networks are next. Without stable pressure from the main supply, pumps across the region begin to fail. These systems rely on precise calibration to little pressure, and water can't move. Too much fluctuation, and pipes risk damage? Now, they're getting both. Pipelines start to rupture. Reports are coming in from multiple zones, cracks forming, valves malfunctioning, entire segments of infrastructure shutting down to prevent catastrophic bursts. Repair crews are being dispatched, but they're overwhelmed. There are too many failures. It's happening too fast. Communication networks are starting to strain as well. Cell towers, dependent on consistent power, begin to drop offline in scattered areas. Emergency lines are congested. Dispatch centers are flooded with calls they can't answer in time. Coordination between agencies becomes fragmented, patchy, unreliable. And then, something even more dangerous begins to emerge. Civil tension. In neighborhoods where water has already stopped flowing, frustration is turning into panic. Long lines at distribution points are growing volatile. Reports of fights, theft, even armed confrontations are beginning to surface. Law enforcement is stretched thin, forced to choose where to respond and where to pull back. This isn't just infrastructure failing, it's order. Because the systems that keep millions alive, water, power, communication, are all connected. And right now, they're collapsing together, not one at a time. All at once, right now, the unthinkable is closer than anyone dared to imagine. Inside Hoover Dam, water levels are approaching Deadpool, the threshold, where the reservoir can no longer feed the turbines or downstream supply. Every sensor, every gauge, every warning light is screaming the same message. The system is about to fail entirely. Once that happens, it's not gradual, it's immediate. Turbines, starved of water, begin to stall. Cavitation intensifies inside intake towers, hammering steel and concrete from within. The hum of machinery, the sound of power and control is replaced by grinding, rattling, and the first small cracks echoing through tunnels. Engineers rush through control rooms monitoring for collapse, knowing that one wrong calculation or one unnoticed vibration could bring irreversible damage. Downstream, Colorado River communities brace for impact. Water stops flowing entirely. Emergency water trucks scramble to cover neighborhoods, but supply is insufficient. Cities like Las Vegas and Phoenix teeter on the brink of chaos. Residents carry jugs through empty streets. Schools and hospitals ration every drop. The air is thick with fear. Cultural zones are devastated in ours. Crops wither. Livestock goes thirsty. Entire food supply chains are disrupted. Panicked citizens and stressed systems collide, amplifying tension into volatility. Law enforcement struggles to maintain order. Reports of looting and fights emerge across multiple states, compounding the crisis. Meanwhile, energy systems falter. Hydroelectric generation from the dam plunges to near zero. Power outages cascade across cities, forcing emergency services into triage mode. Hospitals switch to generators that can barely handle demand. Communication networks dependent on stable electricity falter under the strain. Coordination between agencies becomes fragmented, delayed, unreliable. And yet this may be only the beginning. Scientists inside the dam warn of structural stress that could worsen if the reservoir falls further. Cracks in the concrete, unseen erosion, and persistent cavitation are weakening the dam itself. For 25 million Americans relying on this single artery, the question is no longer when, but how far can it go? The Deadpool threshold isn't a warning, it's a doorway. And once crossed, no one knows how quickly the effects will cascade. Right now, millions are counting on fragile systems. Outside, the desert sun beats down. Beneath the surface, something is already shifting. Toward an unknown, potentially catastrophic future,